Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. This is Simon. So in this video I'm going to talk about my top 3 effective study techniques. Now earlier I uploaded a video about the 3 fundamental principles of effective studying. Now if you haven't watched that video, I'll recommend that you go back and watch that video, because this video is going to be mostly in conjunction with that other one. So in this video I'm going to talk about the actual techniques that you employ to achieve what I talked about in the previous video. Okay, so the techniques that I'm going to talk about here are very wide and have got wide application, but I thought it would be wise that right now I'll introduce them to you and give you some insights and applications that you can start using right now. And the other thing is these techniques really work together, as in I've tried to isolate them because they've got different names and they tackle different categories of that effective learning frame. But I advise you to watch this video through to the end, because you're going to be using these techniques together and they do not work well in isolation. Okay, so the first technique that I'm going to talk about in this video is called the Feynman Technique. Now this technique is going to cater your comprehension part, as in this technique is going to help you understand new concepts, and it is going to help you grasp the information that you are learning for the very first time. Okay, so the Feynman Technique is a technique which is named after its creator, which is Richard Feynman, who was actually an American physicist, a Nobel Prize winner actually. Yeah, he was really known for his ability to explain even the most complicated stuff about quantum physics in very simple terms, in the sense that even new learners of that field could understand it very, very well. And is also for the idea which I mentioned back in my video, and I even quoted the quote by Albert Einstein, which is basically about being able to understand something, as in if you understand something really well, you should be able to explain it in its simplicity, as in you should be able to simplify it and make anybody understand that concept. Okay, so the Feynman technique is actually a very simple technique, but very, very highly effective. Yeah, so it can be broken down into 3 steps. The first step being simply the picking up or choosing the new content that you have to learn, and simply read, understand it. Yeah, so but the way I like to modify this thing is you don't just pick up and start reading as if it is a magazine or a newspaper. What you want to do is, first you have to go try reading some questions, try looking at some questions about that content. Yeah, even though you've never read about that, try reading some questions, go through the material, look at the diagrams, look at the words in bold letters, look at everything. Now what that does is it is going to create some questions in your mind. Sometimes you won't even be aware of this, but when you start studying the actual material, now those questions will be like more being answered, and the information is likely to be very well understood that way. Okay, so the second step, which is basically a bit crucial one of this technique, is you have to teach this information that you've learned to somebody. Now this can be done in group discussions and stuff, but I really understand that sometimes, and most of the times, studying can be really personal, as in you are studying alone. So the way I like to do this is simply teach it to yourself, but in the sense that when you're teaching this information to yourself, you both have to be the teacher and the listener. So what does the listener do? If you don't know something, the best thing you do to learn it is to ask questions. So as you are teaching yourself that content or that information, you have to continuously ask yourself questions that will expose all your weaknesses and gaps. And these questions are very simple questions, just questions like how, what, why is it important. All those questions are going to expose all your gaps. So an example I can give is, let's say I was reading about the nucleus. So the first thing I say is that the nucleus controls all cell activities. Now that is an ambiguous statement, so you ask the question how. Okay, well, it contains the genetic material, and this genetic material codes for proteins, hence it controls all cell activities. So the next question is, how does coding for proteins imply that it controls all cell activities? Okay, so you go back and say, okay, these proteins in this sense are the enzymes, and it is these enzymes that are going to be controlling all these other metabolic reactions in the cell, hence controlling it. So you can go on and on until you look at your gaps, and you're going to spot your mistakes, and you're going to spot your weaknesses. So the third and last step of this Feynman technique is simply to go and review back the work as you were discovering your mistakes and those gaps. You fill in by reviewing the work from the notes. Although I don't know if you are reading it or you are learning it from a video, you go back to the original source of information to close all those gaps. Okay, so my second technique for studying, now this one is a complete game changer. It's called active recall. Now, active recall is actually simple to understand. It is simply actively retrieving information that you've learned. Now, this is actually a game changer in the sense that a lot of people don't do this. They rather go with something that feels intuitively right, but is really not that effective. Actually, it's actually a waste of time. So that thing which they do is rereading. So the thing is, once you've learned something, when you go to revise it, if you reread it, you mistake recall for recognition. As in, if you reread something that you've read before, you're going to recognize that you know it, and you're going to think, oh, I remember this. But that is not actually the case. You've only recognized it in an instance where that same thing was, as in a question was asked about that same information at the time that you reread it before you did the rereading. You won't be able to remember it, and that is the killer part. That is why a lot of people deceive themselves thinking they remember most of the information they've learned so far, but in the actual sense they haven't. And when they go into an exam, they forget everything and think it was stress or something. No, as in you didn't put much work into recalling that information. Okay, so now active recall is a technique that has been scientifically proven, and it is a technique that has been well explained in the book which I mentioned in my earlier video, which is Make It Stick, which I again recommend that you read that book. That book is an absolute game changer. If you want to take your studies to the next level, you have to read that book. Okay, so I have been using active recall for some time now. I actually used active recall in my secondary school, but I didn't know what it was, and it was really effective. I can really testify. Okay, so the thing about active recall is when you actively retrieve a piece of information from your brain which you have learned before, that thing sticks, as in it strengthens that memory. And like just rereading, which basically is gonna deceive you, you're going to think you remember the information, which is simply recognition. Now this is very bad because you're going to be wasting a lot of your time in your revision. So active recall is an essential part of your studies. You should actually implement it right now. So now the ways that you can use active recall is, there are a lot of ways. You can use flashcards, you can use questions, end of chapter questions, you can use past papers. For me, I create questions for myself. I use past papers, I use flashcards, digital flashcards. Actually, so a computer software called Anki, which I use for flashcards, which I'm going to make a separate video about that one, because I believe it's a very good learning tool. But in this one, I want to the basic principles, the basic applications that you can start using right now is, when you want to revise a piece of work, don't go to the notes. Take some questions, either end of chapter questions, try to answer those questions. And this method can be really frustrating, I can tell you. It can be really frustrating because sometimes I've come out of study sessions thinking feeling like I didn't know anything, because out of maybe 15 questions of a topic which I have previously read, maybe I was only able to answer something like 30% of them. Now that is a bit frustrating, but it is good because it is showing you your gaps. And the good part is, if you fail to answer something and then you go and look into the notes to check for its answer, it is likely more to stick. So other ways of using active recall, sometimes you can use mind maps, which I'm going to talk about again in another video. I don't want to make this video really long, but the other one which I recommend using right now is, sometimes just pick pen, paper, flat out, start writing as if you are teaching yourself. Now it is in conjunction with the Feynman technique, as if you are teaching yourself in writing. simply write the information which you are trying to recall as much as you can remember. Then from there, go back to the notes, look at the things that you left out, look at the things that you made mistakes on. You're going to review all that work and you're going to make corrections, and this is going to be very effective in the long run. Okay, so the third and last study technique that I want to share with you is spaced repetition. Now, spaced repetition is simply repeating the work on spaced intervals. It is as simple as that, but it has got tremendous work. As in, okay, this principle is based on the forgetting curve. It is a concept which was discovered by a German psychologist by the name of Hermann Ebbinghaus. I think Ebbinghaus. I don't know how you pronounce that name. Yeah. So the basic principle is that when you read information in like a day, you forget maybe 40% of it. By the time a month elapses, you could have forgotten more than 90% of the work. Yeah. Now that is basically how the human brain works, regardless of your IQ, whether you're a genius or whatever. The thing is, the mind forgets the information which is not using. Now, what spaced repetition does is simply to interrupt that forgetting process. As in, you learn something, before you forget it, you review it. Now you review it by active recall. You don't go and reread the notes again. Now that is going to be a waste of time because you're going to fall into the trap of recognition, which I talked about. So you use active recall to review the work, and that is going to make it stronger in your brain. Now the thing is, when you're using spaced repetition, it is not going to be as in very frequent. It is going to be in spaced intervals. So a practical example I can give is, if I read a piece of information, or rather study a topic today, I can review it tomorrow by active recall. That is by going through some questions or just writing the information on a piece of paper. Then after that, depending on how well I could recall it, I'll set another date, maybe after 5 days. So after that 5 days, I'm going to review the work again by active recall again, and depending on how well I know it, if I remember the information really well, I'm going to set maybe 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, it's going to be maybe a month. After a month, 3 months. So it goes just like that. And this technique really changed my studying strategies, and my effectiveness skyrocketed like something else. These techniques are going to work. Okay, so active recall and spaced repetition, as I earlier mentioned, both of these concepts have been mentioned in the book Make It Stick, which I, again, for the 100th time, recommend that you should find that book and read it. Yeah. Okay, so these are really broad techniques, as I mentioned at the start of this video. So I've only given you some insights on how you can start using them right away, but I'm going to make more videos going into depth of how I use these as in more effectively, and how I implement them in all my study techniques and get the best out of them. Okay, so another thing which I have to mention about these techniques is, these techniques, a lot of people don't like them because they are very demanding. They are going to need you to do a lot of work, as in these techniques are not for lazy people. You're going to be focused, and they need discipline, pure self-discipline, as in without discipline, these techniques, you are going to hate them. Yeah, so you have to be very patient, because getting the hang of these techniques is not going to happen overnight. Yeah, if they are new techniques to you, if you're already using them, then that's good. But if they are new techniques to you, then they are going to take some time before they can really feel intuitively right. But you have to trust the process. You have to trust the process. These techniques require a lot of work, and a lot of people are going to try to avoid them, but just trust the process. That desirable difficulty is something which is going to make yourself grow. Okay, so if you found that information helpful, I request that you subscribe, like, and share this video with somebody else. See you next time.